All right, what's up, love doves? I'm coming at you from an undisclosed location on the road right now, so I apologize if it does sound a little more echoey than usual. We work with what we got. That's what I always say. And I'm here delivering an interview with a really good friend of mine, a good friend of the show. Her name is Mona Morsy, and this is a far-reaching chat, free-flowing chat, where we discuss a variety of important topics, such as the role of art in generating culture and also creating room for new ideas to flourish. Mona Morsy is a Renaissance woman, among many other things that she does. For example, she's my fight coach. She's a very skilled warrior and used to do some Muay Thai fighting as well in the past, and just an all-around badass. But in addition to that, she is also an artist, and she works with a very innovative art form that combines comic artistry with poetry. So original poetry, and then she works with comic artists to create like comic strips, poetry comic strips. And in the discussion, we get into how you can get in touch with her if you want to get some of these really amazing comics that she is producing all of the time. It's inspiring to me how productive she is. She's always working on a new project. So we talk about the role of art in really like driving forward our culture and creating room for, ideas and even sometimes difficult or uncomfortable ideas. She talks about her struggle as a young woman growing up in a household that was intolerant of who she was as a lesbian. So we get into that. And then we also talk about the importance of ladies knowing how to defend themselves and how ladies do not need to put limitations on themselves in terms of their ability to engage in self-defense, because there's techniques out there and avenues of learning that can offset. If you're concerned, for example, that you are a petite lady, you learn some Brazilian jiu-jitsu, for example, you learn how to use leverage, and all of a sudden that is no longer a weakness, it's actually a strength. You can use your opponent's size against them. So we talk about the importance of women knowing how to defend themselves physically in the world. And then we also do touch on a little bit of election stuff, folks. And, anytime you touch the election stuff, it does get sensitive. And so, I think these are good discussions to have. My mantra lately has been that you do not always have to agree with everyone all the time. You just have to listen to them and understand where they're coming from and empathize with where people are coming from, where their priorities lie, and what causes them to, make the decisions that they make. So we get into it a little bit, and I think it's really productive, and I think it's really positive to put this out on the feed and just be open about our thoughts about the whole situation, because I think a lot of people feel sense of like disempowerment right now or trepidation and stuff like that. And the best thing we can do is keep talking loudly about who we are as people, what we believe in, and the type of world that we want to craft for ourselves, because we are creators and we are crafting the world. So with all that said, let's get into this conversation with the inimitable, the one, the only Mona Morsy. And much love, everybody. Peace. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Barbarian Noetics podcast. Thank you so much for joining, for sharing some headspace with us. I am your host, Little Raven, nestled in the Barbarian Lair, and I'm joined today by a very special guest, someone near and dear to my heart. She is a friend. She is a friend of the show, and she's also my fight coach. She is the one and only, the inimitable Mona Morsy is in the building today. Mona, I want to welcome you to the podcast and just give you an opportunity to introduce yourself to listeners, because it's been a long time since you've been on the pod.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about this. I love having conversations with you, recorded or not recorded. So
Absolutely.
I'm super stoked. A little bit about me. I'm local to the Phoenix area. I'm a writer. I'm a poet. I'm a nerd. I love to read. I love to do all the stuffs. And I really kind of live in a creative space where I really enjoy making things. And one of the things that I've made in these last couple years have been these comic books that I've sort of taken my poetry to the next level and meshed them with comic books. And I've been working the last, gosh, what is it, 7 years, maybe 6 years on a memoir that kind of touches on a lot of the history that I have in this sort of slice of life. For me, this experience that I've had with my parents' culture and my parents' religion, and me as an open lesbian, and so just kind of all that stuff, you know. So yeah, I'm just happy to be here chatting with you, and I appreciate you giving me the space to talk about all.
Yeah, this is fantastic. You inspire me in many ways, Mona. One of the ways you inspire me is that you grind super hard. Like your art is always evolving. You always have a new project. And it's like every time I talk to you, you're working on a new project, like moving upwards, moving onwards. It's a good attitude to have in life. It's something that inspires me, like as a creative too. You know, creative burnout is like a real thing, and it really helps to have people in your life that are on the same journey as you, in terms of like always like digging deep, just like moving forward with another project. I would love for you to talk a little bit about your very innovative art where you combine poetry and comic art, and maybe tell people like where they can find out more about that too, because it's really interesting.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So I have it right here because I know we were going to chat a little bit about it. This here is Love by Lamplight, the comic book that I've been working on, that I worked on for a couple of years. Basically, you know, I've been writing poetry for a really long time. I started writing when I was like 14, 15 years old. Got into the competitive poetry space when I was working on my undergrad, which I actually learned that I don't like competitive poetry. I feel like competitive poetry just kind of goes against what poetry is, because I can't tell you that your poem is better than this person or whatever, because oftentimes we write based on our experiences as individuals. And so that's meant to say that my experience and the way that I profess it, the way that I speak about it, is better or worse than someone else. And so I learned that I didn't really like the competitive part, but I really enjoy writing poetry. And when I was younger, I unfortunately was met with some resistance from my family when my mother found out that I am gay. And that came out, my mom kind of pushed me out of the closet, if you will, at a really young age. And as a result of that, I really kind of experienced a lot of times where I was lonely, where I didn't know which direction my life would take. I didn't know if I should stay alive or not. I mean, I really kind of wrestled with things that young people really should never have to wrestle with. And the way that I kind of dug myself out of this hole that I was placed into was by way of writing. And I would just write my experiences. I would rhyme words, and I would wear these words as jewelry. I would, you know, put them on me as sort of this protection, and I would repeat them to myself as my mantras and as my prayers, because it was the only thing that I could believe in at the time. It was the only thing that really made sense to me. And so after all these years of writing poetry, I said to myself, well, what do I want to do with that? You know, and I'd love to be able to just publish it traditionally and have it collect dust at Barnes and Noble. But, you know, I feel like where we are today in the world of poetry is so interesting, because we have this ebb and flow of poetry, right? People love it and they love what it means, and they listen to, like, you know, Mos Def and Lauryn Hill and Maya Angelou, and they kind of love the culture that exists with the written word, but they don't do much else with it. They don't really respect it in the sense that they'll go out of their way to buy books of poetry and things like that. And so I thought it'd be fun to work with an artist on this 3-set series that I'm going to do. And I wanted to work with a different artist for each issue. And I wanted them to be able to draw by way of panels, like comic book panels, what they felt my poetry meant. You know, so I already wrote the poetry, and I would talk to them, and I would write the script, and then I would just kind of give them creative liberties to do what they wanted to do with it. And so from it came the first book, Love by Lamplight, which focuses on some relationship type poetry, some, you know, interesting kind of experiences that I had. You know, it kind of looks something like that. And then the second one that actually just kind of hit the world, if you will, yesterday, I picked it up fresh off the print, is As I Burn Babylon. And this one here it talks a little bit more about the culture and the religion and that divide when you're facing those very big and very real, kind of thoughts, and you're not accepted into them, you're not accepted into them because of the way that you were born. And so that was one of the things that I had to endure for a very long time. And so I wrote about that, in this one, and these are a lot of poems that I had written when I was younger.
Show the cover art really quick. The cover art is really, really, really cool. And yeah, it's an innovative thing, Mona. Combining like comic style art, panel style art with original poetry. It's bonkers that I hadn't like ever seen this before. It seems like such like a organic fusion of art forms. And it works so well. Do you want to read us like a little bit from it? Like just to give people like a little bit of a sense of the type of poetry that you roll with.
100%.
I absolutely love it. Like the whole zine world, the whole taking publishing into your own hands. Like it's such a limiting factor for like ordinary people, for working people trying to get their art out there. It costs so much money. There's all these middlemen, there's all these gatekeepers. And what I really appreciate about what you've done is you've just taken the matter into your own hands. You found your own way to publish through the format of zines, and you've just found people to do it and made it happen. And Mona has like tables at local comic shops and stuff like that where she engages with the public. She gets her art out there, finds a way to do it. You just like bust down obstacles and make it happen. I love it.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's one of those things that, I could either wait for the world to revolve around me, or I can just do my best and attempt to make a space for myself in it. And sometimes I feel like there's never really an opportunity for me to put my stuff out there, even for my memoir, right? Like my memoir, I'm very excited about. It's going to be done by the end of this year. I've been working with my editor, and we've been really doing this thing, and I hope that it gets published traditionally, because that's really how it's going to get to the masses and to the people. And it's one of those things where I see a bunch of like famous people who are already well known, and they have these projects and they put something out, and that's great. But I'm like, I'm not well known. I'm just your average, person doing their thing. And so yeah, I just want to be able to actually have something tangible that I'm proud of, that if somebody wants to learn more about me, I can pass them a comic book, or I can tell them where to find my memoir or something like that, so.
It reminds me of, Mona was a guest on the podcast, like way back in the day, way in the beginning of the podcast. Yeah. I think it was years ago. And people can go back on the archives and listen to the interviews. There's a 3-part interview where she shared her story about growing up gay in a household that was very intolerant of that lifestyle, and how you were saying like it's like you couldn't wait for the world to make space for you. You had to make space for yourself. I feel like that's very much like how you've lived your life. So it makes sense that you kind of pursue your art in the same way. I've done similar thing with my podcast as well. That you can't. I think as artists, you have to create space for yourself. You have to be bold in that way and be like, okay, this is who I am. And, it doesn't mean that like, that you have all the answers, or that you think that you're like 100% right. It's not about that. It's about creating a space where you can express yourself and express your ideas, even if the world's not ready to give you that space.
100%. And it's one of those things where even in the second book, As I Burn Babylon, in the first one, it was mainly just the poetry and some extra art and some things. And I have like one, author's note. But in As I Burn Babylon, there's a lot more writing to kind of give the reader a sense of where these poems come from and why it's titled As I Burn Babylon, and what Babylon even means. I mean, and I really like that, because it sort of allows me to say, okay, well, this has been my experience. This has been who I am, and why I write the way that I do, and why I write about what I do. Because even though I've been able to forgive and kind of live my life past the things that have been done to me, I think it's important to never forget those things. And that's why we have to talk about them. Even in my memoir, a lot of the things that I talk about took place, 10 plus years ago, but it's important to mention them, because it might be my past, but it could be someone else's present. And when you speak of the things that have taken place, and some of those experiences mimic what you're currently going through, it gives you a sense of clarity and power, and if I wait around to publish something for someone else to read it, or, they might be like, oh, I didn't know that you existed. Or, when I was younger, I would have loved to have a book where someone's father is from North Africa and someone's mother is Latin American and their father is Muslim and their mother is Christian, and they have this crazy divide, but they're gay and they know that, and they're very sure of themselves, and they don't want to hide. They want to just be accepted and go out into the world and say, this is me, this is who I am. Will you just shut the fuck up for a minute and let me just figure this out? But instead, I was riddled with all of these tariffs, these sort of, like I have to kind of give myself, I sort of have to like pay a toll in order to just talk to you. I have to kind of apologize first and say, hey, I'm not really gay. I have to lie about it. I have to do all of these things that people don't understand is so diminishing to a person's spirit. It's really whatever embers could exist in me have just sort of been put out, and I'm unable to. I've had to spend my life trying to figure out how to have that fire burn again, and that's what all of this is about. It's really just a place for you to just be who you are, and so I think it's important that you got to make way.
Yeah, and like allowing people to feel like they're not alone too, to have like other art out there that reflects their own experience. I imagine there was moments in your childhood where you did feel very alone and isolated. And so like now you're part of the change in our society where there's room for you to exist how you are naturally without having to fit in. I would love for you to read like a little bit from it if you want.
100%, sure. This is a poem that I wrote, and I'm really bad at titling my poems, and so this one I've titled Pariah because I didn't know what else.
It's hard to title. It's really hard to title
poems. It really is, yeah. And this is more of a shorter one, but yeah, I'm happy to read it.
Please do.
I was a pariah, my flesh, my bones, a sin writer from head to toe. Your constant divider, never friend or foe, taught you to segregate as though you didn't know. Excuses filled your mind as you explained to me the reasons for your divine, soft-stretched reality. A wickedness in your eyes constantly stabbing me, a never-ending surprise you never wanted me. The pain in my heart not understanding you, the disconnect from the start, all because you weren't true. Your culture taught you wrong, you became a mockery. The saints of every song never dreamed of stopping me. You can't admit that you were wrong for having dropped me, so you pretend to tag along as the angels follow me.
Damn. Thank you.
Yeah, man. So that's the art that you'll find. This artist here is Lord. He's a Greek artist, an incredible comic book artist, and I'm really happy to just be able to, have some of these other artists, real life human beings, sort of give that, again, human experience to the poetry and make their art with my poems. So
absolutely. Yeah. And if people want to like get some of your zines or whatever, like how can they do that?
Yeah. So I have an Instagram page at the Lighthouse Monocle, and they can hit me up. It's sold in Phoenix at a few different comic shops. Drawn to Comics in Old Town Glendale, Ash Ave Comics in Tempe, Greg's Comics in Mesa, and then I have Love by Lamplight, and then I will soon bring As I Burn Babylon over to SO Coffee Shop, and that's where those are sold. But people have hit me up on Instagram and they say, hey, I want to get a comic book, and then I'll mail it to them, globally. Of course, I don't have a website right now where people can purchase, mainly because the comic books are $10, and that's really just covering the software that I use to design them and the cover printing costs. So if I start to pay for Stripe and all of these different credit card companies, it'll just end up being kind of like it'll put me in the negative. And
yeah,
this is an indie thing. It's a super small scale indie passion project, and I pay the artists out of my pocket. This whole thing is funded by me, and I think I'd have to sell thousands of books to make some of that money back. But it's not about that. It's really just about getting the word out there and being able to spread my story and to spread the love that's come from a dark place. And so being able to hit me up online and say, hey, like I want a comic book, like that's probably the best way to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. We talk about that often, like being artists in the modern world in this like hyper capitalistic landscape where everyone has an angle, everyone's trying to make a buck. You know,
Yeah.
even like finding people to work with, you really have to like find people that you trust, that actually understand what you're doing, that believe in art and the power of art and the importance of getting messages out there and not just about making a buck, and finding creative ways to do it like on a shoestring. It's very difficult. This society does not make it easy for artists.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just something that people, you have to be real with that and like understand that it's a passion project. Same with my podcast. Like this is a passion project. I do it because I believe in it. You know, we're not getting paid. Maybe one of these days, like we'll experience a shift and you know, we'll actually have that like sort of that monetary reinforcement. But like in the meantime, we're doing this like out of our own hearts, out of our own passions. And but there's something liberating about that too, because it's like, fuck it, I don't even care if this is going to make me money. I'm doing this because I believe in it. There's
Yeah.
something life-giving about that and like very affirming.
Mm-hmm. Well, exactly. Words and books and zines, they're immortal. They'll live forever. And if I die tomorrow, at least I know that I've left my stamp on this world and I like all of my words haven't died with me, and that's kind of one of the things. And it's really important for me to create. And sometimes it's even outside of the poetic world. I love doing many things, and it's just, I think it's important. I think it's important to invest in yourself. If I make money and I go out and buy other people's comic books, well, what does that say about how much I believe in myself? If I have a comic book I want to make, or if I have a book I want to write, or if I have a podcast I want to do, why go and listen and read other people's ventures into their own independence and not invest in my own? And so I learned that years ago. I never regret any amount of money that I spend on investing in myself and in my dreams, because that's all I have. That's all I have. And I learned that. I learned that even though I can have a support system and love and all of those things, sometimes you're kind of alone in this world, and you have to make sure that you are your cheerleader and your best friend and all of that. And so, yeah, man, I'm with you. And for the record, when I was on your podcast years ago, I mean, the fact that you're still just like grinding, you're still doing your thing. I love that so much. And the same as you've said about me, like you are also an inspiration to me. And I love everything that you've done with your podcast. And I'm so proud of you and how far you've gone. I mean, truly, like I remember when it was just like kind of an idea or sort of like a thing that you were doing. And now it's like the thing, and I just love that.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And I will take any sort of positive reinforcement because, yeah, being a public artist sometimes is very lonely and very intimidating. You're putting yourself out there to be like judged and analyzed and evaluated. And as like we're just individual people trying to figure it out ourselves too. And so it's hard sometimes. You have to be very like strong within yourself and believe in the process, especially like believe in the process of creating art, the process of expressing yourself. And that allows you to like sustain when, you get like, there's like haters, there's like people that analyze and evaluate and say like, oh, I think this about that, which like the thing about that is it's actually a positive thing. Like we need to be able to like have discussions. We need to be able to have disagreements. I believe that like it's important to actually be emotionally uncomfortable
Oh
sometimes
yeah,
so that you
absolutely.
can actually like process what the hell is going on. This kind of brings me into a topic that I wanted to talk about today. So let's get right into it. There's so much talk about like safe spaces, and I would love to hear your thoughts about like, what do you think a safe space is? I'll start the conversation by saying that I like to use the term respectful space. And then there's another term I like to use of sacred space. And I think that these are like distinctions that we should discuss. So what I personally believe like a respectful space is it's a space where you might not agree with everything that is said. However, there is the baseline of respect and understanding that there's like this idea of good faith. There's an idea of that no one is trying to attack anybody. No one's trying to tear anybody down. It's just that we might have different ideas about things. And then there's the idea of the sacred space, where like that's where we can have like epiphanies, realizations, like spiritual experiences, or like psychological breakthroughs. Like I would say like therapy is like a form of sacred space, because you're allowing yourself to be vulnerable in a way so that you can hopefully like have breakthroughs about yourself. What are your thoughts about, like, there's just so much talk about safe space, and I feel like there's a lot of confusion and misunderstanding around like what that actually means at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think ensuring that you exist in a place where you can be authentic is a very important thing. And my experience with safe spaces and sacred spaces, as you mentioned, my experience with that actually came by way of not having any of that in the most formative times of my life. I didn't understand what it meant to have an ally. I didn't understand what it meant to be a part of some kind of alliance where I might be gay and you might be straight, and that's okay. I kind of grew up understanding or feeling like if I'm gay and you're not, like we're already like it's not going to be okay. And the reason that I felt that way is because, as you mentioned before, and as I mentioned a little bit, my parents come from different countries and they're of different religions themselves, different from each other, which may have contributed to their divorce. Who knows? But, I mean, hey, maybe.
You never know.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, hey, one story is another story is another story. So who gives a shit at the end of the day? Um, but what ended up happening is, even though they divorced when I was very young, they stayed in each other's life, and maybe it was for my brother and I, maybe it was because this was a form of attachment. Like it's a routine. You know that this person's around, and you don't know what else to do, and all of this stuff, right? And so what ended up happening was when I was about 14 years old, my mom found out that I was interested in girls and that I'm gay, and she found out by way of my journals and my notes that I would write to the girlfriend that I had at the time. And I started pretty young. I mean, I had a girlfriend when I was 14. I mean, is that young? I don't know, man. Is that young?
I mean, I don't know.
I
I
wasn't.
I started I was interested in girls when I was 14. Like I remember that. That was about the time when I started getting like really interested in girls, was like 13, 14.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
Because I very much had a girlfriend that like I'd like fool around with, and like we'd kiss and we'd like hide from people, because like we knew that it wasn't a thing that the world existed, that the world that we existed in, we knew it wasn't okay for them, which is also really fucking tragic, isn't it? I mean, you're 14 years old and already you know that what you're doing is in defiance. You have to do it, and no one likes it. It's not like somebody woke up one day and said, "Hey, just so you know, being gay isn't cool. Just so you know, it's not okay for you to do this." You just feel it. It's like I felt it, because of my mom and her religion. And she was very like, and every once in a while, somebody would make a comment about a character on TV. There was a movie that was playing, and let's say, it's like The Birdcage, and there's a gay character, and it was always somebody who was being laughed at. A gay character was meant to be something that you laugh at. It wasn't a real life person. It wasn't someone that actually existed. It was sort of satire, a kind of comedy, and so anyway, like you kind of learn about that. And so she found my notebooks, and she found these notes that I would write back and forth to this girl that I was dating, and because she was the only girl that I knew who was like me, I felt like her and I were alone in the world, and she was my sacred space. She was my safe space, the person itself, and that's very dangerous. And I learned that it was dangerous when I was young. You need to be able to have a space where you can exist alone and be okay with that. It's nice to have, and this is my opinion, right? It's nice to have the support. It's nice to have the love from allies and family members, etc. But it's really important to be able to exist in a place where you don't need those other people. It's okay for you to just say like, "Hey, this is me," like this office that I have, for example. You see a bunch of stuff in the background and all of this, and I was telling you about the comic books that I make and everything. That to me is a very safe space. It's a reassuring space because it's a space that I've created. whatever happens outside of this space, whoever leaves, whoever comes, whoever argues with me or not, this space exists still, and it's a space that I feel good in. I feel like I can be myself and I can be authentic and I can write about whatever it is that I want to write about and be however it is that I want to be. And it's such a difference. It's like night and day, because when I was younger I didn't have that. And like I said, those are very formative years for me, starting from 14 all the way into my 20s. I mean, I was always fighting with my mom, always fighting with my dad, and him and I have always had this ebb and flow because I feel like I had to be somebody specific to be around them. And that's not
Mm,
fair either. And so when it does come to having spaces where you have people in them, the people who claim to love you and the people who should be your ally, you need to be able to be who you are with them as well, because otherwise your whole life is just built on something fragile. It's built on something that's not real, and so when I was in these, like when I was in my 20s, I would like write poetry and I would maybe go to like an open mic or two, and I felt okay. I felt pretty, because for the most part, poets in general, they're kind of open-minded people. They write about love and all these sorts of things, and I was always trying to find a space for me. I was always in search of some place that I could just kind of be and exist. And it wasn't until my mid 20s that I realized, that space kind of has to exist within me. And then after I became comfortable with that space within me, then all of a sudden, the world kind of opened up and it was okay. Hey, if you don't like the fact that I'm gay, I'm not hitting on you, baby. I'm not asking you to do anything with me, right? If you don't like the fact that I'm holding hands with a woman, then look away. If you don't like, you know what I mean? Like it kind of, all of those things sort of became okay, where like hey, like if it's something that you don't like, then you can leave. And
yeah,
that was an open invitation to my parents as well, the very people who brought me here, the very people who made this difficult, where I was supposed to change who I am all because you didn't like it. Well,
right.
that's not accurate. You can go too. And I've lived that way now into my 30s, because I have to be able to have a space for me where I'm not living based off of someone else's rules and what they think their societal norms should be. And so I think the different terminology that you use is really important, but at the end of the day, all that matters is that you feel that you're in a place where you can be your authentic self. You don't have to apologize or hide. You don't have to change names of people in your life. Instead of saying wife, you say partner, if that's not what you do. Because I don't use the word partner or spouse. Naomi's my wife. Done. Right? Like because like I didn't go through all of this fight and stuff, just to make it seem like we're working at a firm together. Like I
Yeah.
don't, like she's my wife, and I love that, and she's also my best friend, and she's a lot of things, and so for me, like I said, like I like your terminology. I think that's important, but it's for me, it's making sure that I can feel that I'm in a space where I can create and I can be and I can exist, without having to have all of these sort of like, hey, sorry, oh yeah, I guess I am like that, but none of that shit.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Creating creating the safe space within your own self so that you can go about the world, and you almost like it reminds me of the idea of heart math when you go into a situation, and by power of your own breathing and keeping your own composure, you can almost have like an effect on your environment.
Mm,
When you're strong within your own self, you feel safe within your own self, then you
mm,
can move about the world with this confidence and boldness. And so then, like, what do you think about like when there are disagreements? You know what I mean? Like, how can people have disagreements in a way that doesn't like cause like explosions and sparks and stuff like that? Like, it's hard when, especially like for this topic in particular, I feel like I don't even know if there is. I think people should accept people for who they are, point blank. Like, I don't, like, I don't, and you certainly shouldn't have to feel like you're like you shouldn't have to advocate for your own way of being when it's something as personal as like your sexuality and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
just like outside of that, like like when you start talking about like social justice, cultural issues, stuff like that, I feel like sometimes in our society, as soon as there's a disagreement, people have a tendency to like shut down and run away,
Hmm.
and that causes this like fragmentation in our society, where then people only engage with people that like hold their own the same beliefs as them, and there's very
100%.
little room for like I believe that we need to be able to have difficult discussions in order to like have movement, and also just to like exist with one another. Like
Mhm.
so one of my main soapboxes is like the corporate mainstream media is not your friend. They have an agenda. They're trying to make money, and they also have like a certain like line that they're trying to spread. Like they're not there to give you the truth. They have like an agenda. The corporate television is telling people right now that if their family members voted differently from them, for example, in this past election, that they shouldn't hang out with them at the holidays, that they have every right to just completely like sever their familial ties because they voted differently. That type of thing I feel like is incredibly dangerous and damaging. And like I also, sorry, I'll shut up in a second, but like
Yeah.
my mom, God rest her soul, she would always say like, "Don't ever talk about politics. Don't at the dinner table." She's like, "Don't talk about politics or religion at the dinner table." And
Yeah.
I've always like questioned that. Like, is that really how we want to be? And then is that like what kind of a space is that then? Is that a safe space if you're not even allowed to talk about like your religious beliefs, your spiritual beliefs, your political beliefs? How can we have disagreements in a way that is like civilized? Is it
Yeah.
possible?
Well, I think now more than ever, it's a touchy subject, and it's always been touchy, but it's even more of an issue that you need to kind of tiptoe around. And the reason for that, I believe, is because in this particular election, we didn't just agree to disagree, and we don't just disagree on things, right? Like voting for Trump, for example, tells people who didn't vote for him that it's okay that a felon runs the country, a person who, if I were a felon, I wouldn't even be able to vote, let alone become president, a person who has these felonies based on allegations of rape and molestation and sexual harassment, a person who maybe some people have had those experiences themselves. Maybe they have been sexually molested themselves. And now to know that somebody has had that experience with who will be our president, that can be a little bit damning. A person who voted for Trump might be okay with the fact that potentially the rights of women will be diminished, and this whole your body my choice thing, even though it is absolutely disgusting, unfortunately there's an idea behind these people that they say, well, yeah, I mean, because if let's say that I say to you, hey, I don't think you make enough money to have a kid, so I think that you should get a vasectomy, just so you don't have any mistakes, right? As a man, you might be like, well, who the fuck are you to tell me that? You don't know shit about what I need to do with my balls, right? Like who the fuck are you to have me go through this very not invasive procedure to have something happen to me that would result in me not being able to, potentially live my life the way that I want to, whatever that means, right? Well, that's what men are doing for women, right? So men are saying that women cannot abort a child, and it's always the woman. It always goes back to being on the woman, because when a man gets a woman pregnant, oftentimes the man can leave. He can not even know that he got her pregnant. It could be a one night stand thing, and he has no responsibility. He doesn't have to live with this baby in his body for 9 months. He doesn't have to then deal with the consequences of parenting. If the father wants to be involved, then he will be, but the mother has to be involved no matter what, because she's the one undergoing the physical changes of her body. And so when we talk about something as dire as having the ability to make decisions on my own about my body, that is a very different thing than just disagreeing on the type of steak you like, or the kind of movies you enjoy, or the books that you read. So it's not a matter of just disagreeing and having a safe space about it. We are talking about the fact that you don't think that I am as much of a person as you are. And so when you vote against that, you are showing me that I'm not equal to you. You believe that I'm lesser than, and you're this kind of hypocritical person who's going to have the audacity to talk about a woman shouldn't get an abortion and shouldn't be able to get an abortion. But do you adopt children? Do you care that much about kids? Kids have died. Kids who are actually born and have lived in the world have died from the lack of gun rights that we have in this country, and no one seems to be caring about that. And of course, there's all these numbers and metrics that we can pull off to talk about it, but the very fact is, you only care about the child before it's born. When it's actually born in this world, there's very little care that's paid. And the unfortunate truth is, there's been a lot of kids that have died at the hands of now. I mean, I'm a gun owner, and that, so I'm not sitting here saying like, oh, everybody should not have guns. Like I was a bodyguard and I was paid to carry a firearm. Like I trust me, like I don't necessarily want anything to happen to my guns either, but I'm also okay with undergoing more of a stringent policy when it comes to owning a firearm, because I'm a responsible individual and I'm not lazy. And I don't think that I'm just entitled to firearms because I'm in America. And that's what I think we sort of see when you might hear on different media channels of people talking about, oh, well, you shouldn't, like talk to your family or whatever. Because I'll tell you straight up, like it's definitely made a difference in my opinion of people who have voted for Trump who are in my family, because there's also this rumor that's been going around based on what Trump has said about dismantling gay marriage. And we don't know what's going to happen with that, obviously, because Trump is just all talk mainly. But the problem is, he's so wishy-washy that I don't know which direction you're going to go. So why would I risk that? I'm going to make sure that I'm going to vote for someone who has my best interest and the best interest of like-minded people at heart. I'm never going to want a child, and I'm never going to get pregnant by a guy. I'm a lesbian. I'm married to a woman. That's never going to be my story. But why wouldn't I want a woman, maybe a friend of mine, maybe somebody else? Why wouldn't I want them to have the choice to get rid of something that could potentially be a burden to them? I'm sorry to say it that way, but it's true. Because I know many people who are single parents, and the majority of them are single mothers. I don't know. The only single father I know is because his wife died. That's it. A lot of these single mothers that I know of are because the father just wasn't ready. Okay, so then you kind of you should have wanted the abortion. Well, she's not ready, but she has to live with this thing growing inside of her. It's not as easy as just saying, hey, you know what, I'm not ready for this. Let me know how much money I can help you. But I got girls to go and meet. I got countries to go and visit. I got vacations I want to take. I got degrees I want to get to. I'm not ready to be a parent. Well, that's her story too. So why does it always fall on her, right? And then the whole dismantling of gay marriage. I mean, I know very few people who can say that they have fought as hard for the love in their relationship, of a same-sex relationship. I know very few people who can say that they have fought as hard as the LGBTQ plus community. Some people don't realize, they take it for granted how much they have to fight. When Naomi and I first met, it was illegal for us to be married. Illegal. I mean, we couldn't even do it if we tried. And it wasn't until Obama said, hey, what are we doing here? Let's just legalize this shit because there are people too. And he didn't always think that. Obama, there are early interviews of Obama where he felt that marriage should be between a man and a woman. But guess what he did, which is something that I think is incredible. He changed. He was able to learn and change his mind and realize that that's not the case. And that's something that you don't see happen in the right-wing conservative extremists. And I'm not saying that every Republican and every Trump supporter believes these things. I'm just saying that there's a lot of right-wing extremists that exist in our world, and that's dangerous. It doesn't leave space, for us to just be. And that's what I think, people are kind of fighting.
Yeah, I think there's not enough space in general in our political spectrum that we have. Like just the choice between these two major parties.
Mhm.
I don't really like to publicly talk about like how I voted or whatever, but
Mhm.
I'll say that I believe very strongly in multiple parties, like having more than
Yeah.
only two options. I
Mhm.
think that's like one of the main problems is that people feel pigeonholed into having to either choose choice A or choice B, and then if you believe in like a third, fourth, or fifth party, you get attacked as like, oh well, you're helping so and so win, you're helping them win, you're taking votes away. The reality for me is like if there wasn't a third, fourth, fifth option on the table, I wouldn't have voted for the first two, just because like I pay a lot of attention to things like foreign policy, and I
Mhm.
just see the two major parties as almost like a duopoly when it comes to foreign policy. Like I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but like if you just look at Obama's foreign policy, like some of the wars of aggression that he waged with NATO and stuff like that, it's pretty horrific.
Mhm.
And that continued through the last Democratic administration. It's like because our society is very much imperialistic, like the United States, I refer to it as an empire. It seems like it's very imperialistic, and there's all this emphasis on like overthrowing other governments that don't like bend to American corporate interests. And so then it's like it's hard for me then to vote for a party that I know is going to like attack other nations like that too. And that's what makes it so tricky, because then like yes, there's these very real concerns like you say then that get like swept up in that. It just sucks that there's such a small spectrum of possibility with the two major parties. And
Yeah.
I wish that there was less aggression against like third parties. Like I get attacked all the time for believing in third parties, because it's like depending on what side you believe, it's like, oh, you're taking votes away from this or you're taking votes away from that. It's like there's a lot of people that wouldn't vote at all if there wasn't for the third party. And but like so yeah, your points are very well taken, and it's a hard there's like no easy answer to it, you know what I mean? Like it's almost like you feel like yeah, maybe you don't want to talk to people even if they're in your family, if they voted a certain kind of way, because of what that says about what you feel like it says about their but they're it's almost like personal, like they're saying that they
Yeah.
personally don't.
Well, and that's the thing is, like about like the third party stuff, like there's always, I mean, there was like, you can vote independent, you can vote, green, you can vote those ways, but right, with the experience of being an American, that no, that third party is not going to win, that. And so, it's always going to be red or blue, no matter what. It's always going to be either a Republican who's going to win or a Democrat who's going to win. And I personally don't believe in voting for the party. I think that you should vote for the person personally. I've never said like, oh, I'm a Democrat through and through. Like if there was ever a Republican that stood up and talked about some things that I believed to be beneficial for us as a nation, for us as a marginalized people, because when I say us, I mean people like me. Like this is the world that I live in too. I shouldn't just because I also can't vote just according to how our president is going to treat other countries, because like that's not like you think Macron gives a fuck about us here in America. You think, like Markle is worried about little old Mona here in the States. No, I believe that that's a bit of a privilege to say, well, I think I'm living pretty good here. I don't have to worry about whether I can get married. I don't have to worry about being racially profiled. I don't have to worry about whether I'm going to be paid enough because I'm a man and everything is great. So let me now focus on what other countries have to go through, and I'm going to vote that way. I've never had that perspective because I've always been in the margins. Always. I'm gay, I'm a woman, and I'm of color. And people don't like that in America. And it doesn't matter that America's been stolen from the Native Americans. It doesn't matter that America was built on the slaves of African Americans. None of that matters to the people, because everybody in America if you ask an AI art generator to make American people, they'll all be white. They'll all be in suits. They'll all be going to their Wall Street job because that's what America is. They don't see us as people, and so of course we have to fight for those things. We have someone in our family, me and my in-laws, and Naomi's family. We have someone who outly votes Republican, conservative, red, Trump because they care about their gun rights, and that's it. That's the only thing that they say, and so which doesn't really make any sense either, because of course Harris and Waltz are gun owners, and Waltz is a hunter, and so no one ever talks. I mean, these whole 4 years that we've had a Democratic president, nothing has happened to firearms, and again, I know that because I'm a gun owner and I shoot and I buy ammunition and I do the whole thing. But if that's the only thing that they're concerned about, I mean, what a privilege. I mean, wow, like, congratulations, you've won. You are living the American dream, because the only thing you give a shit about is if you can pew some fucking paper in the desert. That's incredible. I care about whether, as a woman, and my friends who are women and the people that I care about, if they're going to be able to live in this country freely. I care if we're going to turn into the Handmaid's Tales. I care if I'm going to be able to be married to my wife as long as we can be. Because I mean, whether somebody says, hey, your marriage isn't noticed, well, I still love her and we're still together. We're a unit. But I'd love to be able to know that the country that I live in, and the one that I call my own, and the one that I pay taxes in, gives a shit about me as a person. Of course, I don't want there to be war waged in other countries. And of course, I mean, both my parents come from different countries, so obviously I have an appreciation and a soft spot for overseas and different countries, but I also have to give a shit about me here. I have to care about who I am here. That has to come first, because it's me. I'm the main character of my story, and everybody's the main character of their story. And so, for me, I just find it to be a little bit of a kind of a swayed perspective, when it's like all we're worried about is, like, different policies that are going to affect other countries. It's like, well, but what about us? I mean, what about me? What about if a woman gets raped? Is she supposed to raise the baby of the person that she was raped by? I mean, what kind of a world are we talking here? Those are the things that are, and even though that might be extremes, right? We're living in the extreme here, so we have to think the same, I think.
I really appreciate this. These are the types of like tough conversations that we need more of, in my humble opinion. We need to be able to sit with these ideas and like really listen. Like I really value this immensely, your perspective. I want to talk about the importance of acting locally and investing locally, because so we both are in Arizona. And one of the great things about Arizona is that you can get measures on the ballot locally. You get enough signatures and you can get measures on the ballot locally to achieve local political change through the form of propositions and stuff. And there was a specific proposition on the ballot for Arizona, which was about making sure that women have access to safe, affordable abortions in this state. That was on the ballot. So I just think like that's really important. And I want to encourage people to not, it's easy, you get overwhelmed and blown away by everything. And again, I don't believe that the corporate media is your friend. I think that it's very demoralizing when you just watch the man or woman on TV and you take your viewpoints from them. I think it's demoralizing and it's disempowering. But like, so some people, then they check out and they're like, well, fuck it, I'm not even going to vote at all. And I'm like, what a shame. Because we do live in these local societies, and your vote really matters a lot in terms of these local propositions. So like that is incredibly important. And it took me 45 minutes, Mona, to understand my ballot, because the propositions were worded so complicatedly. They were worded in such a way as to not make it clear at all. And I had to like research. I had to do my own research to find out like, what the fuck does this even mean? And some of the propositions were very sneaky. Like they had propositions to try to like take the right away. There was one that was like, oh, we should make it harder to get local propositions on the ballot. We should make it, have more of a ceiling for signatures and stuff like that. So there's always this attack on People that seek power, they seek it hard, and they're always trying to consolidate that power, and it starts locally. So I just feel like I encourage people to not get so overwhelmed to where they just like check out altogether, and at the very least, like vote on local issues that matter to you, and take the time to read your ballot and understand your ballot. I'll say something else. Some of my friends who are Mexicans, for some reason, they have a lot harder time getting their ballots than I do. Like for some reason, I get my ballot. I registered. I moved here like what, like 8 years ago. I registered for early voting, and I get my ballot sent to me like clockwork every election cycle and every midterm. It gets sent to me like clockwork. Multiple of my Mexican friends don't have that experience, even though they registered the same as me. They, for some reason, don't get their ballot sent to them, and they have to re-register every time. So
Yeah.
like, I just think that's interesting. I
Yeah.
think that the issue of honestly, Mona, the issue of like white supremacy is like very real. And it's frustrating to me. Like I've been alienated. We're getting into like quite sensitive territory here, but fuck it, let's do it. I've been alienated by some of my friends who happen to be white because of my beliefs about migration, for example. I'm quite radical, my belief about migration. I understand that it's a complicated thing, and I understand that people are concerned about like jobs being taken. I also understand that in the capitalist structure, there's forces that want specifically to bring people in who are undocumented so that they can drive the cost of labor down. That's like a systematic issue. So I understand these things, but also from a human perspective, I feel like migration is a human right, and humans have been migrating forever. And some of the communities like that exist, they've existed, like they've straddled these borders for millennia, and then the borders have like occurred and like broken up their communities, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
anyways, I just think it's like it's a very complicated issue, but I've been I've like lost friends. Okay, here's an interesting fact. Most of the friends that I've lost recently, they happen to be Caucasian. Like that's been
That's not interesting to me. Oh, that's not surprising to me. I mean, it's like, well, what I find to be interesting about that is tell me what job we're talking about here. What job are people really scared that like, some Mexican who doesn't know English that well, who doesn't, have the rights and the papers and the legality that you as a white American has, what job exactly are they taking? Because a lot of the people that I know who are undocumented or who have come to this country and they've been here for so long that now they are documented, like the kind of jobs we're talking about are the things that your average white American person wouldn't want to do anyway. I mean, they don't want to do the landscaping, and they don't want to do the construction and all of
or
this.
the work in the
They
slaughterhouses.
don't want to. They don't want to be a cook in the. Yeah, exactly.
One of the reasons why you can go to Fry's, why you can go to Safeway, and you can get like huge quantities of like pretty good quality meat at such low prices is because you have so many undocumented people working the slaughterhouses and honestly not getting paid what I believe they deserve, because that's one of the most challenging, difficult jobs I can imagine, is
Yeah.
working at the slaughterhouses.
Well, and that's the thing is, like sometimes, like I have some family members, obviously, because my mom when she was younger and she came to Arizona, she wasn't documented, she is now, but she came to Arizona when she was very young. And I mean, we're talking like cleaning buildings at midnight, stuff like that. It's like, to your point about the media, this is what the conservative extremists feed the working class and white collar people, is like, oh, they're going to steal your job, so you got to make sure that you view them as the other. They are not your friend. They are the person that you need to get rid of, and we need to demolish them from this country, and that's just not accurate, and that's the thing is, anybody who I know, who I ever grew up with, who was undocumented, or didn't speak the language or whatever, they always had the job that was left over, that the American white person didn't want. I mean, that's just the reality. I mean, it's not like It's not like they're fighting for, you know, jobs to be nurses and doctors and stuff. They can't get the same kind of training that we have access to, because we have the language behind us, and we have the citizenship behind us, and we have all of that stuff, you know. So it's really just kind of a shame, because those are just the facts, you know. I mean, somebody who comes here undocumented cannot take my job. You need to have a degree to have my job. You need to know the language, and you have to have experience to have my job. They can't take it. And it might very well just be, you know, maybe somebody's fighting to, you know, to clean offices at midnight, and you know, but also it's like you probably want $80 an hour for that, because you feel that you're entitled to that, because
Yeah.
you're America and everything is expensive and I deserve that, because the Americans are entitled people. Well, you're not going to find that with, you know, Jose Sanchez fucking coming over being cool with 10.25 an hour, because him and 15 of his other family members are going to live in the same goddamn house, because that's just the reality. You know what I mean? And I'm like you, where like, I know that it's complicated. I know that it's more than that. Trust me, I know that. You know, but it's like you dislike it for reasons that are kind of silly and superficial. You don't because without the without the immigrant, I mean, founding fathers, do we need to talk about how they were immigrants and they came here to
Right.
seek asylum? I mean, those are facts that you actually can't talk about, because unfortunately that requires logic, and a lot of the people that we sort of fight with these kind of these sort of arguments with, they lack the logic, because you can't talk about facts with them. You have to talk about the sort of periphery, the things that someone said, and then I'm very, you know, I attach myself to that, and I live in this echo chamber where everybody says the same thing, and I'm just parroting what I heard on Fox News or Echo Times, or, you know, whatever the case is. And then it's,
Yeah.
you know, or Epoch Times, whatever it's called. But you know what I'm saying? Where it's like, you know, you kind of have this group of people that are just like telling everybody what to think, because we also unfortunately live in a country where a lot of people don't think for themselves. And
Yeah.
they just kind of, you know, live in this place where everybody's just saying the same shit. So
Yeah, that's one of the main issues I really feel is political education of the people. And I
mhm,
think it's incredibly dangerous to just plug into a TV or plug into a newspaper and get your viewpoints from them and just
yeah,
accept it all and then regurgitate it uncritically. I think that has to change if we want to see like real change in this country. People have to like really educate themselves about the issues, not just take perspectives and then regurgitate them blindly. And it's a really big problem. And the newscasts, it's literally called television programming. It's
mhm,
designed in a way to program your views. They use very sophisticated psychological methods, you know, like even like the sounds, the tonal like frequencies and stuff like that. It's really like hypnosis, in my humble opinion. And we really need to, like, as a people, we need to unplug from that and start to like really learn about things. I want to bring something up to you. So you were mentioning how in your perspective, focusing on foreign policy is not as important as focusing on the policies that affect you as an individual. I would argue that when we talk about something like migration, foreign policy does become quite important, because it's American foreign policy that drives a lot of the migration into the US. When the US goes to places like Latin America and destabilizes entire regions, causes mayhem. When things like NAFTA was passed under Clinton, that like demolished the economies of Latin American countries, and then it caused people to struggle with their livelihoods and put themselves in a situation where it was actually worth it. Because like my thing is like, where's the respect for migrants? They're risking everything. They're risking arrest and worse. Like it's very difficult to migrate. You put yourself at great risk. There's power
100%.
brokers within the migration, especially as like women get taken advantage of and stuff like that. It's
Sure,
horrible. Where's
naturally.
the risk? Like, what is it? Why are they taking this risk? It's because their situation in their own country is so dire that they feel
Mhm.
like they have a better chance at success by taking these difficult jobs, like for example cleaning office buildings at midnight or working in slaughterhouses. They feel like they have a better chance of success taking those jobs than they do even in their own country. And I would argue that that is largely a result of American foreign policy.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, I mean, they are literally seeking asylum. They are seeking a safer and better life. I mean, who doesn't want that? You know, I mean, there's so many people who, leading up to the election, there was a lot of these interviews that were done with, like, you know, just random Americans, and they were like, oh, you know, if Harris wins, I'm gonna move to a different country, because, you know, I want a better life. How is that different than what you're trying to stop? You want to move to a different country because you don't like the way that things would potentially be run in this country. So you're seeking a better life for yourself. So how is that different than, you know, some person coming from Mexico to try and do the same thing for themselves and their family? Well, it's not. But again, that requires logic. And I agree with you in the sense that, of course, you know, in the greater scheme of things, we have to be able to have these appropriately placed foreign policies and things like that. And at the end of the day, it all trickles down, and it always affects us. But when we're talking about me, I actually, if immigrants come to this country, I don't see necessarily a problem with that. Of course, I think that everybody needs to contribute. I don't like the guy on the corner who, you know, just, you know, like asking for handouts necessarily, or just using, you know, drugs all the time, and making our world an unsafe place. You know, but they could be American, right? Like, I don't like that just as much as the next person. So I think that people need to contribute, because if, you know, if that's just how the world goes round. But what I meant earlier is that I have to also focus on how I'm impacted individually, and foreign policies and immigration. Although I know that would impact me in terms of, you know, maybe population and job security, if, you know, if that's truly an issue, which I don't necessarily think it is, but that won't impact whether I'm respected as a woman. That won't impact whether other women can get abortions if they need to. That won't impact me being, as a gay woman, if my marriage is going to somehow be um what's the word he's using? I forget.
I don't know.
Somehow undone, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's the thing that impacts me directly, you know. And that's sort of what I mean, is like, I have to be able to focus on those things. And I personally believe that the right over the left would rather have me, a gay woman, not have the rights that someone who's in the democratic or a little bit more liberal thinking would have. And so I have to vote appropriately. You know, I can't just say, oh, but okay, so are you cool with gay marriage, and are you cool with women's rights, and do you believe that women should be treated the same as men? And if they say yeah, okay, well, talk to me about your foreign policy though. You know, it's like, okay, I get that it's all important, but like, and maybe this is just a selfish kind of mindset, but I'm not going to put those in the back seat because someone's foreign policy isn't where I think that it should be, because that impacts me directly. Why would I live in a country, or why would how am I supposed to feel safe in a country if I can't be married to the person that I love? If something happens to a friend of mine, and they want to get an abortion, they can't. Or let's say that let's say that they want the baby, but let's say that, you know, it's complicated, which actually I knew someone who, unfortunately, the baby wasn't viable, and they had to move. They had to go to a different state in order to get an abortion, and that costs money. You know, not only travel time, but you have to use PTO or sick leave, and you have to pay for that. You know, what a tragic option, right? I mean, like, you don't want to go through that. And she and her husband wanted the baby, so that's already emotional. You know, it doesn't always have to be this dramatic thing where she's some slut and she just fucked some guy, because the guy isn't a slut, right? She is, but I digress. You know, so it's like, it doesn't have to be this thing. It could also just be that it's like a really tragic event. You know, so that's where my mindset is. So I agree with what you're saying, you know, but I also have to, we have to say, like, but how am I to live? Am I going to be able to be okay here? Because this is where I'm paying to live here. I have to pay to live on Earth, no matter where I am. So which section of Earth am I going to be safest in? You know, you had these dumb motherfuckers who had this "Your Body, My Choice" slogan. It's on T-shirts now, believe it or not. You know, and all of that comes from the hatred and misogyny and sexism that exists in this world. Well, why does it exist? Because we continue putting people like all of these right-wing extremists in office who have the platform, and they say these really wicked things, and it always puts women in a role that's demeaning and subservient. And that's why I truly believe that Harris didn't win. It has nothing to do with her policies. It has everything to do with the fact that she's a woman. And that's why Trump got the colored vote too, because there's a lot of cultures, the African American culture, Latin American culture, they could never have a woman president. I mean, are you joking? Come on.
Well, Mexico has a woman president right now.
Yeah, now, and
But
I mean, and
Claudia
after
Sheinbaum.
she was elected, there was the governor of one of the little cities in Mexico was murdered by way of stabbing, because the cartel was trying to send a message to the now president. So I mean, but that doesn't mean that the country itself is not misogynist. It does. I mean,
Right.
like, how many women, isn't Mexico like the top country that has the most females that are murdered? I mean, so we have to, I mean, we have to also look at the fact that it's just because a woman is president doesn't mean that necessarily the whole country is now. And I'm glad that she is. I really am, and I hope that she's able to be safe, and so far she has been. But that's also to say that there very much exists this sort of machismo kind of perspective from the Mexican culture. I mean, I personally don't think that Mexican men and African American men, and this isn't all of them, obviously, just like you can't put everybody into this kind of category, but I think for the most part it has a lot to do with the fact that they couldn't vote for a woman, and the same goes for Caucasian men. I think a lot of it has to do with this inherent misogyny that exists, because I have to be able to let you know as a woman that you are beneath me as a man. And if we have a president who's a woman, well, what's that going to say? That's going to make you feel that you have power, and I can't have that. I'm sorry. And there are more people who believe that than there aren't. And I think that that's unfortunate, but that's also the truth.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've been having conversations with acquaintances of mine who they get like really upset when people say that like the only reason she didn't win was misogyny. They get really upset and they're like, no, it had nothing to do with misogyny. But it's hard to argue that misogyny is not like a really big issue in our entire global society. I remember we were talking at the coffee shop a few weeks ago, and you were saying like, how ridiculous is it that you have to like even consider that, like even when you're traveling and stuff like that, you have to ask like, wait, but how is it for ladies in this place?
Wild.
It's like, it's wild, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously we're not going to solve all of these problems right now with this conversation. I think one of the important things is to have these conversations and to sit with these thoughts and facts, which are, admittedly uncomfortable. There's a lot of reasons why people voted the way that they voted, and we can't possibly parse all of them. And
you can't change it either. It is what it is, and that's the truth. At the end of the day, when Trump moves into the White House, he's my president too. And I have to just respect the fact that's the reality. I can't be a baby like the previous election and talk about it being stolen and all of this nonsense. I mean, at the end of the day, it just kind of is what it is. And that is the majority of America. I was surprised that, and I guess the reason that I also think a lot of misogyny and sexism has to do with it is because a lot of Harris and Biden's policies are kind of similar, and they're sort of built on the same foundation, because she's, our vice president right now. And she won along with Biden, obviously. And so what ended up happening is that a lot of people, if you just look at the numbers, there's a lot of people who just didn't vote, so they just didn't come out for the vote the way that they did when Biden was president. And the main difference is the fact that he's a white guy. So I just believe that, there's a lot of people who I know voted for Trump in his first presidency who were like, I can't vote for him again because of X, Y, and Z reasons or whatever. And then, now it's like, I'm just not going to vote. And so it's like, okay, I mean, you just kind of have to think about that. And I can't answer these questions. I have no idea what's actually accurate. I just can go based off of my experiences and what I see. And, at the end of the day, I know that misogyny and sexism is a big thing in this country because, I mean, women weren't even able to vote until the 1920s,
Right.
and that was just white women, right? It wasn't until the 1960s that Black women were able to vote. And so, you have to look at the facts for what they are, and we can't just say, oh, but it's not that. Okay.
I mean, and then there's other factors like Muslim Americans, for example.
Mhm.
A lot of Muslim Americans did not support Harris because they were so upset with the Biden administration's handling of Palestine, and they were very clear that that was their number one issue. And like it's hard to argue with that, like from their perspective as Muslim Americans.
What
It's
about
really
the
important.
travel ban?
Yeah, right. I know. I
That's
hear you on that.
it's
I
like,
just
no.
know like I just know like what I've been hearing from people, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah,
But
100%.
I think it's important to listen to people, like at least listen to what people have to say. I think this idea of you don't have to necessarily agree with everything, but you do have
Yeah,
to listen to what people say.
for sure.
And I did hear that a lot from my Muslim American friends and acquaintances, that they were just really upset with how the Biden administration handled the situation in Palestine, and that's why they didn't vote.
Yeah,
Um, this is kind of like a third rail topic in our society. Like when you talk about the sort of like imperialism of the United States, and it's a big topic. It's too much to dive into right now.
yeah, sure.
But I do think it's important to point that out, that people people have been very clear that that was their reason for not voting. But
Yeah,
then at the end of the day, like the misogyny is a global thing. It's a worldwide thing, and there's
yeah,
places in the world where it is like not that great just simply to be a woman, and we have to address this. And it's like fuck. It's can seem very overwhelming sometimes, but I think like at least just having discussions like this is like a good starting point to addressing it. You have to like address an issue before you can hope to solve the issue. I think like being a strong, powerful woman in the world is incredibly impactful for fighting back against this issue of global misogyny. I
mhm.
can't think of what I wanted to talk a little bit about. Where I'm going to switch gears really quick. Do you have a little more time, by the way? We're already over an hour, but do
Yeah,
you
I
have
got
some?
some time. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I want to switch gears and talk about the importance of knowing how to defend yourself as a woman.
Yeah.
One of the cool things about you, Mona, is that you were a semi-pro Muay Thai fighter, and I believe your record was pretty impressive.
Yeah, thanks, man. I wouldn't go as far as to call myself semi-pro. I did a lot of like the smoker fights and stuff, and the Muay Thai gym that I was at was really cool about making sure that we had time to fight. We really kind of got into, like, there was our training hour, and it was like a 3-hour class. I mean, it was kind of bonkers now that I think about it. Like, I wouldn't do that today. I'm like, that's too long, but yeah, so I had a really good time with that. I got into Muay Thai, and then I got into Krav Maga after that. And Krav Maga was really kind of where I really started to enjoy the fight of it, because with Muay Thai, you're training. You don't have to compete, of course, but you're training, in this kind of sense where you're going to get into the ring, and you're gonna probably fight with somebody, and there are rules in a ring. There are rules in an octagon. There are rules in this sort of setup, that a lot of these organizations have. And you can't say the same about Krav Maga. Krav Maga prepares you for when there are no rules and there's anything. I mean, there's weapons, there's firearms, there's bats, there's knives, there's swords, there's sticks, there's, eye gouging, there's all kinds of nonsense. And so it was really Krav Maga that I kind of started to kind of really feel that power of being able to defend yourself.
And one of the reasons you became proficient in self-defense was out of necessity, I believe. Like
Yeah.
your life circumstances put you in a place where you needed to be able to physically defend yourself.
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off of what we were just talking about, there was always this sort of there was always this kind of place that I existed in terms of society, right? Where like I would date these girls, and I would go out, with them and our friends, and there were always just this sort of There was a handful of examples where I just felt like, we would always be approached by guys, and these guys would, just kind of say whatever, they would want us to go back home with them, because of course men always view lesbians to be existent for their pleasure and not just for our own sake. And so they would always kind of make this sort of asinine request that like we as a couple would go back home with them. And we
It's
would
like,
always
yeah, sure, why not? That's what we're totally we're like this sovereign couple of like two ladies that are into each other for the purpose of pleasing men. That's why we
yeah,
do it.
100%,
Absolutely. Yeah,
100%.
that makes so much sense.
Yeah, it's bonkers. It's
That's
like, again,
insane.
no logic. That's all right.
That's insane.
Yeah. And I remember there were a couple nights where we would kind of, we'd be like, well, but like, obviously you're not what we're looking for. Like, we've got each other,
Yeah.
like, we're good. We'd have these conversations, and there were a lot of times where these guys would be like, well, what do you mean? Like,
Damn.
obviously you need a guy. Like, you can't just like, mess around with each other. And it was this very kind of like wicked mindset that I found men to have. Obviously not all men. I have a lot of close guy friends, you included, so I'm not saying this as a general. It's just that these particular people. And there were a couple of nights where I found myself having to actually like physically defend myself against these guys who just wouldn't back the fuck up. Like, maybe they had a drink in them or something, and they were kind of like, just feeling like they can just, like, intrude in this space that we had together as a couple and as individuals. And so, it was kind of from that and that sort of like frustration and anger that you have. And I know that a lot of people, I don't know if you've ever experienced something like that, where a guy is trying to make his point come across to you, where he's coming on to you and you're saying that you don't want that, but he's just not backing off. I don't know if you've ever had that experience. I hope you haven't. But that does something to you as a person. You kind of feel like, well, but obviously I don't want this, and my words aren't enough, and sometimes words aren't enough. And so I kind of like built this sort of like frustration and anger that I had in me with things like that. And then I started working at this coffee shop. I was working at a coffee shop in Old Town Glendale back when that was back when there was like a good coffee shop culture there. And the coffee shop was called a Shot of Java, and it was actually open until like 2 a.m. It was this kind of unique coffee shop where like you had like the poetry and the open mic and the bands that came out. There was a lot of b-boys and b-girls. Like, it was like your coffee shop culture, like you kind of like think about, at least me, like that was sort of like what was in my mind. And there was this guy that would go to the coffee shop all the time, and he nobody would like talk to him because everybody was always like sort of scared of him. His name is Sean. And he would always wear black. He had a resting bitch face. He never smiled, right? But no one ever asked him to either. Hint there. They were cool with the fact that he didn't fucking smile. And they just kind of let him be. Like, they were like maybe he's a little scary, whatever. And because the coffee shop was open super late and it wouldn't really get a lot of traffic during a certain period of time, it was always him and I in the coffee shop. It was just me and him every night almost. And we got to talking, and he just turned out to be a really cool guy. I mean, he just was, he was in his 50s at the time, I think, when we met. And we started talking about firearms. Eventually we got into this conversation of firearms. And I didn't like guns at the time. I was young. I was 19 or something. And I just was like, oh, like, there's too many like guns around, and everybody's like, unsafe with them. No one gets trained right. And so all of this. And so anyway, long story short, he ended up inviting me to go to a range with him. And I used his gun, and I shot it, and he kind of taught me. He sort of became my gun father, is what I've called him. And I know him now till this day. He's been in my life ever since. And so what ended up happening was I felt, okay, well, now I'm comfortable with firearms. He bought me my first firearm. I went and did like the CCW, and I went and got trained, and I carry, the firearm and stuff. And I'm like, well, what happens if this firearm gets like taken from me? Or what happens if, like I'm in a fight and someone else has a firearm or something like that, and during this time I was already doing Muay Thai. And after that, after this kind of thought with the firearms and other weapons, I found Krav Maga. And that's when I started to join Krav Maga, because that's when you have weapons that enter into the fight. And that seemed a little bit more realistic to me. My goal wasn't to become a Muay Thai fighter or to enter a ring and do competitions and stuff like that. It was just to defend myself. And I felt like Krav Maga maybe was a better place for that.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, what can you say? It's hard to overstate the importance of knowing actually how to physically defend yourself. And I think especially like as a woman in the world, like, can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what did that do for your confidence just moving about the world,
Yeah.
knowing that you could physically defend yourself?
Yeah, I've always been a pretty strong girl. Like, I'm not small, by any means. And my idea of like a workout is usually to lift weights and then go home. Like that's just kind of like how I've always been. And I'm not some like, bodybuilder or anything like that. But I've always wanted to stay strong physically. I've always felt like, I want to know that I can at least put up a fight and do the best that I can, and I'm not just like some like weak girl. And I think society tells women that they have to be certain things, and I've always felt like I've never fit in that. And so I've always wanted to make sure that I always put my attention into becoming something other than that. And so learning how to defend myself really helped my confidence. It really allowed me to like boost this self reassurance. The fact that I knew so much about me, and being able to defend myself against somebody, an assailant who's coming behind me, or somebody who wants to just like fight me square on. And I'm not saying that I'm like the best fighter and that I'd kick anybody's ass. I mean, that's not what I'm saying, but I'll at least know that I can put up a fight, and I feel confident in myself that I can fight and get home safely. And I think that a lot of women don't have um, that reassurance, or that reality. A lot of women kind of depend on the men in their life, unfortunately. And men, not all men are strong. Not all men are capable. Not all men are able. I mean, that's just the truth, right? I mean, I've trained with a lot of guys myself, and I'm stronger than a lot of guys. And I in that and even just in terms of like a power struggle, right? Like if you don't know how to fight and I don't know how to fight, but I'm stronger, I might have the upper hand. If you know how to fight and I don't know how to fight and I'm stronger, you potentially can have the upper hand, because technique will hopefully overcome your inability, your the fact that you're not strong physically. But you don't know what equation you're going to walk into when it comes to a fight. And so being able to at least find the confidence that you have, and being quick on your feet, knowing a few techniques, that's all really important stuff. And for me, it meant that whenever I traveled outside of the country, I was safe. And I actually feel safer outside of the country than I do in the country. In terms, like I've never been to Italy and been like, oh, I'm gonna be attacked. You know what I mean? Like I don't feel that way. But if I go to like, Central Phoenix or something, or like downtown or Maryville, then I'm like, I'm pretty sure something might happen here. So but I think it's important, to be able to defend yourself, and to have that mindset. I mean, if nothing else, it allows you to say like, oh well, I'm empowered. And maybe, I mean, I don't know the way that men think. um I'm not sure I know how women think either, to be honest. I don't know where exactly I fit in there. I'm somewhere in the middle, I guess. But there might be this inherent freedom that men think, because in general they're not the ones that are being attacked. In general, they're the ones who can defend themselves. And if a guy walks up to a girl in a bar and starts like going at it, if another guy comes up to defend the girl, the other guy might kind of back off a little bit. Whatever it is that feeling is, I think if you learn how to defend yourself, you'll feel that too. And that's the closest thing I'm assuming.
And it also makes you less of a target if you have a little bit of confidence in your ability to defend yourself. That radiates off of you when you move about the world. That
Mhm.
is something that it's hard to explain, but you can sense it. It's how you move in the world, how you present yourself. You do not you become less of a target, and I
Yeah.
think that's really powerful. I also wanted to briefly touch on a lot of ladies sometimes feel like, well, I can't fight because I'm petite. you know, I'm maybe the whatever. You look at what is it? A tech medium like Brazilian jiu-jitsu, which is all about like leverage and using technique to equalize those things. Another thing about ladies is that ladies typically have a lot of strength like in their lower bodies and their cores. And if you know how to utilize that properly, you can actually turn it into an advantage, not a disadvantage. What are your thoughts on that?
100%. I mean, you kind of hit it all. And jujitsu, judo, they all teach you how to use leverage, how to use technique. And that's why I said earlier, you know, if you might not be strong, but you have the technique behind you, that's really going to help you out. You know, I've seen it with my own eyes where some super strong big guy is neutralized, if you will, by a smaller fighter, and it's all by way of technique. Because sometimes, you know, I've heard this before, and I've not done my own research on it, but I'm pretty sure it's accurate that women handle stress and pain better than men do. And so oftentimes, you know, men kind of like, you know, like let's say that I'm in a fight or something, and you know, like I go for like a crotch shot or something. Like that's probably going to put a guy out for a while, whereas a woman, you might not find that to be the case. And so you know, if you're
That's
able
a
to,
great point. Men have one very, very extreme vulnerability, and that's
yeah,
their fucking crotch.
mhm, yeah.
No
And
two ways about it.
sometimes it's a mental thing too, you know, like men just don't like, I don't want to be hit anywhere in my body. Like I don't want to be hit anywhere, and it will hurt no matter if you punch me in the crotch, it's going to be hurt. Like I'm going to be in pain. Right. So I'm not saying that like, it's, oh, like we're just immune to it. It's not that. It's just that sometimes it's a mental thing. Like I don't walk around the world like I don't want someone to hit me, you know, in my crotch. Like I don't walk around the world fearing that one thing. Where I feel like
Yeah,
guys, and I could be wrong, but I feel like guys are like, I better not get hit in the dick today. You know what I mean? Like it just this,
absolutely.
yeah, you
Yeah,
know,
as
like
a man, you don't want to get hit in the dick. You just
yeah,
don't.
sure, yeah. I mean, like, and again, like as a woman, like I don't want to get hit anywhere. Like I don't want to get hit in the face. I don't want to get hit in the boobs. I don't want to get hit in the, you know, like anywhere, right? Um, but I say all of that because you know sometimes like it's even just like, I mean, even if you're just like, you know, kind of like going for that, and you might not even like go to like punch or kick or knee or whatever. There's this sort of, you know, kind of like buckle that you see, you know, kind of guys do, and I've seen it like, you know, like when I look up like Kimbo fights and like street fights and stuff like that, you know, you kind of see it. But I say all of that because technique is really your best friend. It doesn't matter if you're this like, you know, super strong. You can look up on YouTube. There's like bodybuilder versus jujitsu. You know, I mean, like the jujitsu guy is like you know this big. You know what I mean? But the bodybuilder is this huge bodybuilder, and the fight is over in just a matter of minutes. And why is that? Well, it's like you said, leverage, and it's technique, and it's the ability to use the person's body against them.
Right.
You know, and you don't necessarily have to do jujitsu for that. You know, like I said, Krav Maga is a really good way because Krav Maga is sort of all encompassing anyway. You know, Krav Maga it's borrowed some techniques from jujitsu, from judo, from aikido, from Muay Thai, from everything, boxing. You know, and that's why I really enjoyed it because it's kind of a buffet of martial arts, if you will. You know, you kind of have it all. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think that any woman who thinks that, oh well, I'm too small, I can't do this and that, well, it's like, well, then you already gave up. I mean, then who are you mad at if you get attacked? If you think already like, oh well, I'm too small, I'm never gonna be able to defend myself. Okay, then you're right. You're probably
Yeah,
right.
absolutely. I wanted to end the conversation on this idea of mindset. This is something that you've helped me a lot with. Full disclosure, Mona's my fight coach. I've been sloughing lately. We need to get back into it. We need to get back into the fight club. We even have a
Bob
Bob. We
Bob's
got a
hanging out, man.
we got a Bob to smack around now too and
Yeah,
everything.
yeah.
But yeah, Mona's my fight coach. One of the things you've helped me with the most is the idea of mindset, having the attitude of like, I'm like, what are we trying to do here? You know,
Yeah.
you are trying like, first off, you don't ever want to get into a fight. This is the whole idea behind martial arts is to not fight. Like you prepare yourself to know how to fight so that you don't actually have to fight. And there you can do a lot of de-escalation with your body language, with your tone of voice, and
Mhm.
again, just your composure, how you carry yourself. When you have a certain degree of knowledge, you carry yourself differently. But talk a little bit about that mindset of like, okay, if you're gonna fuck with me, you are gonna get fucked up.
Yeah. Well, and it's one of those things where even if somebody is like arguing with me in the street or I'm at a restaurant and someone, calls me a name or whatever, I mean, what am I going to do? Fight every single person that pisses me off? I'd be fighting right now. You know what I mean? Not that you're pissing me off, but I'm saying I wouldn't have even gotten on the podcast because someone down the street's pissing me off. You know what I mean? It's like, what am I supposed to do? Just fucking punch everybody in the neck? I'd love to do that, but like I have things to do. I have dishes to do, and I have a wife, and games to play. So at the end of the day, it's like you have to really think about it. And I think a lot of times it comes down to this to ego. You kind of have to ask yourself, like, hey, I mean, am I just gonna walk through this world proving myself every single day, or am I just gonna know that, hey, I'm a badass, I'm cool, I could fight you, you'd probably lose. You might not, but at least you're gonna get your ass kicked. And I don't have to do that though. I have to just, I have to be able to ask myself, like, what's the goal here? And so for me, if there's ever somebody that argues with me or whatever, like I would always try to just de-escalate the situation because I don't want to turn my back and then them try to attack me from the back either. I want to make sure that we're neutralized before I leave this conversation. We're going our separate ways at the same time because I don't trust people to not do some kind of some sort of like sloppy kind of cheap shot, right? And so using your voice, being confident enough with your voice is really important, and just, always having your hands in a neutral space, always making sure that, you kind of have your hands in this area. So if you do need to block or you need to do whatever, then you can, but you could also look like you're you're peaceful, right? Like, hey, like, I don't want to do this. I want to make sure that we're good. Like, I don't want to, I'm not offending you, whatever the case might be. And you have to be able to kind of have that conversation. You can sort of see them either de-escalating or you can see them kind of getting a little more fired up. And yeah, so for me, it's like, well, if we are going to get into this fight and we are actually going to be like, because it's going to take a lot for me to physically fight somebody. Back in the day, it didn't. I mean, like that. It was, but I was also in a very angry state, when I was younger, and I kind of had to work through a lot of that. And that's kind of where I am, why I am where I am now, where it's important to be able to defend yourself, but it's also, you have to be smart about everything. I'm not so arrogant to think that no matter what fight I get into, I'm going to just walk home, unscathed and everything's going to be fine. I mean, you don't know who's out there. People could have guns and knives, and, you can have knives that are this big and they can be damaging, and they can be life altering, really, any kind of injury. And so, for me, it's like making sure that I'm going to de-escalate the situation. But if I am going to enter this fight with you, I'm going to make sure that I leave you in the state that will allow you to never forget who I am, because something about you will be altered if I'm going to fight you. Your face, your spirit, your mind, your life, something about you will be changed because I now have to defend my life is what it is. If I fight somebody, it's because I truly believe that my life is in danger. I'm not going to fight you because you took my seat. I'm not going to fight you because you called me some dyke bitch in a bar. I don't give a fuck about that stuff. I would never in a million years. If I felt like my wife's life was in danger or my life was, then we're going to go, and I'm not going to be happy about it. I'm not, but I'm going to do what I need to do. And that's the mindset that I think is really important, because the other person probably is going to have the same mindset. Or they might not, or they're arrogant and they're like, oh, I'm gonna fuck this bitch up, who gives a shit, blah, blah, you're dumb, and, I hate you, and whatever, you know what I mean? And you're just a woman, whatever it is, right? And that's fine too, but that's kind of the mindset that I think you and I talk about, where it's like, if you're gonna enter this fight, enter it and exit in one piece, not giving a fuck if that person is breathing or not. And I hate to say it that way, but you have to be like that. This is a cutthroat world. People don't give a fuck about you. They don't. And if somebody's going to fight you, I mean, I'm not going to just sit here and punch you a couple times and then we're going to be done. Like, you want to fight me, we're going to fight, and
yeah.
And it's unfortunate, it's really kind of like a damning sort of mindset to have, because it's like, well, but again, like it keeps me safe. Like I'm fine with that. I know that if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it right.
Yeah.
And there's no rules at that point. So
Yeah, you're gonna do everything you can to avoid that outcome. But
Yeah,
if that outcome gets brought to you and there's no way to escape it, then you have to see it to its full conclusion.
yeah,
And that full conclusion is not gonna be it's not gonna end well for the person that brought that to you.
yeah, and
Because
I hope
you're not going out there causing problems, you know. You're just living your life. This
100%.
would be a scenario where someone brings a problem to you. So it's like, okay, well, now we have a problem.
Mhm.
You've brought a problem now.
100%.
So yeah, I just think that's really important to keep in mind. And then
Yeah,
again, to encourage people to not just like not put limits on themselves because they see themselves as petite or they see themselves or this or that. That is, there's just no reason to put a limit on yourself. There's techniques you can learn. There's people you can go to like yourself to learn from. There's courses and classes all over the place.
yeah,
And you can build yourself into someone that is not to be trifled with, no
yeah,
matter who you are, no matter how much you weigh. Um,
100%.
it's just a matter of applying your will and having the proper attitude.
100%. I think it's so important, you know, and you're right. Oftentimes it is like the woman who thinks that she's a little petite and too small. But if you walk into any big gym, you're gonna see guys of all shapes and sizes. Like I
Yeah,
said earlier, not every guy is tall, not every guy is strong, not every guy is able, not every guy can defend himself. It's not true. This whole kind of fallacy that I think a lot of men live behind is like, well, I'm a guy, I'm here, so therefore I am. And
right.
that's not true. I'm sorry to say it. Just because you're a guy doesn't mean that you're going to just win the fight. I mean, come on, you know, like you this it's just not accurate. And I think that that kind of perspective is a little bit limiting for men as well because they think that they don't have to do the thing because like they're tall, for example. Like I was having dinner with a group of friends and one of them her husband is really tall. He's like six, you know, I don't know, six something. He's not really tall, I guess. He's like, you know, 6'3" or whatever it is. I actually don't even give a shit, but he's tall. And you know, she was kind of making fun of the fact that he doesn't have like strong legs. And it was just a funny conversation, you know, but there was a relationship banter and you know she was like, well, he thinks because he's tall he doesn't need to like work out his legs, right? Like he always skips leg day and all he does is work on his arms, you know. It's just this kind of funny thing, but she made a
Yeah,
point where it's like you think that because you have this thing, right, because you're tall or because you're a guy or because whatever, you don't actually have to work on any of that stuff. And I think that that's a really privileged mindset to have. I know a lot of women, almost all women, would love to be able to just say, well, I'm a woman, so I don't actually have to defend myself because guys won't fuck with me. Not true, you know. But it's like just because you're a guy and you're tall doesn't mean that like I'm not gonna climb your ass like a fucking tree if I'm gonna fight you, right? Like that's
right.
not accurate. Like why would you think that? You know, of course I'm gonna probably like go lower and take you at the legs because like I know that, you know, you're not gonna think about those things, you know, stuff like this. And so I think once
Yeah,
you get into the fight space, you're able to understand like you know, I think for the most part, I think guys who learn how to fight, they want to be able to defend themselves just like anybody else. But who are they defending themselves against? The same people that I am, right? You know, and so I mean, I think for the most part, I guess it would be guys. I mean, they're not going in there saying, okay, when a girl comes up to you and they're trying to fight you, you know, you make sure that you I don't know what. I mean, like that's just not a conversation, right?
yeah.
So yeah, I do think like you're right. You know, you just got to make sure that you understand that the fight space and the mindset is for everybody's safety, and it doesn't matter what you look like, doesn't matter how tall you are. There's space for you. So
Amen. That's a great way to bring this conversation to a close. We've been going over an hour and a half. I want to thank you so much for sharing all your thoughts and insights with us. Before I let you go, just let people know again how they can find you if they want to reach out to you about your comic book zines, if they want to talk to you about anything else. How can people find you, Mona?
yeah, 100%. Thank you again for having me. You can find me at the Lighthouse Monocle on Instagram. And if you want to get your hands on any of the comic books or zines that I have, you can let me know, hit me up. If you're local to Arizona, you can find them in a few of those shops that I mentioned: Drawn to Comics, Ash Ave, Greg's Comics, SO Coffee Shop. Not everything that I have is in those. So if you want to, you know, I can meet you somewhere, or I could send it to you by way of mail. You know, it's super chill, very small. in terms of not making it complicated. But yeah, I'd love for anybody to be able to hit me up. You can chat with me about anything. I'm here to help in any way that I can. And again, thank you, Little Raven, for having me. I appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you too. This was a great conversation.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
much love, everybody. I'll be back on the air real soon. You all take care. Peace.
I've been jogging since day. I work hard, I got stamina. Bitch, you not a boss, you a slave, you a regular. Is it cause I'm hot that you hate, you competitor? Bitch, you know I want you the prey, I'm the predator. I've been jogging since day. I work hard, I got stamina. Bitch, you not a boss, you a slave, you a regular. Is it cause I'm hot that you hate, you competitor? Bitch, you know I want you the prey, I'm the predator. I've been popping since day, I'm the king.